This week we are joined by the amazing Louise Ktoris, also known to many of you as Tales of a Lady Gun on Instagram. Hi Louise, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Jo. Lovely to be here, darling.
Before we get into our topic, which is the Wild West of gun dog training, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the gun dog world?
Yeah, I mean, I always say it's something I accidentally fell into, a bit like Alice in Wonderland falling down the rabbit hole. And, we just got a puppy and I found myself in puppy training, which was gun dog training. And I think they say the rest is history. I kind of got very passionate about it. It was a time in my life when I could make space for something different for me. And it was just a window that opened and I haven't stopped loving it ever since, really. And I've gone from 1 dog to 11. So...
This weekend's messages literally broke my heart. Sunday broke my heart, right? It started on Saturday night. In our group, I saw a message where basically, I won't single the message out, but somebody asked for advice, and the advice that was under it, some of it really shocked me. I was like, where in our open membership have we suddenly allowed that type of conversation to go on? So that conversation was stopped very, very quickly. I contacted the group experts, they jumped in, we put the novice right, because the novice was getting incorrect information without a doubt.
Perfect.
So on Sunday morning, or maybe on Saturday night I put the message out about, it was basically trainers stop telling novice handlers that they have to beat their dog in order to do a good job with it, because that doesn't reflect on their ability to train. It reflects on your ability to teach them to train. If you think the only way you can train a dog is to pick it up by the scruff and punch it in the face, then you really shouldn't be a trainer. A, you shouldn't have dogs of your own, but B, you certainly shouldn't be a trainer. Because when the novices are going to them, and you've probably seen it because you've been a novice and I've been a novice, and I still probably convince myself all the time that I am, we don't know what we don't know, and we look to the people who we are told they know what they're doing with gun dogs, or we see people out with gun dogs who are perfectly well behaved, and we think, oh, that's what I want. And then we go and seek out advice and help and think, how do I get there? And then if we're unfortunate enough to fall onto one of these trainers, we either go along with it because we're too scared not to, or we believe that that's the way these animals should be trained, or we leave and come away from it and never go back to gun dog training ever again. Or we leave, come away from there and go to the opposite side of the spectrum completely, where we find a trainer that says, don't stop your dog chasing sheep, wait until it comes back. Don't worry about your dog running 14 miles away, wait till it comes back, because we're not going to get involved with the dog's choices. To me, it must be for a youngster, a novice, the most baffling place in the world they've ever walked into. And I said to you when I sort of sent you the conversation about this, I feel like gun dog training is literally the Wild West. You literally have no concept of what you are going to get.
Agreed.
So when you first came into gun dog training, probably like me, you were a little bit like, where do I start? Yeah. How did you work that through?
So for me, I actually came in very sideways because I got this puppy and the guy who I bought him from said, oh, you might want to take him to this puppy trainer. I wasn't actually thinking about gun dog stuff, and this was how it all began for me. So I went along just thinking it was a puppy session, and it had been, 12 years since we'd had a puppy. So I just thought, oh, no, this is a really good idea. Went along, he turned out to be a gun dog trainer. Oh, whoa, okay. So I had no expectation, I think, which probably helped me because I didn't know that I was going to go on to do what I was doing. So therefore, the expectation was not there. I was just learning, listening. The guy had a really lovely way with his dogs, a lovely delivery. And yeah, he seemed to know what he was doing. He was a little bit shouty in places, a little bit patronising, I thought. We all had to do things singularly. But then as time went on, I became more and more fascinated by this world of gun dogs and what that meant. So I kept on doing it. And, my dog was doing the things that were required and asked. But when I look back on it, there are times when, like heel work, for example, and the way in which it was being taught, I think he's what they would call nowadays old school. I've since come to know that old school trainers have a tendency to have a harsher hand. He never hit any of the dogs, but there was a lot of stiff compliance. I think I would say that was expected. A lot of jerking, yanking, of the lead. And when you're talking about young dogs, a lot of them were, sort of ranging from 6 months upwards. The oldest one, I think, being 14, 15 months. They're still young, that sort of tissue. And whilst I corrected stuff, and I've since gone on to know all these things have a place, there is a way in which you do it. And so even just from those more maybe subtle harshnesses that we're sort of seeing, but then when I then went on to a shoot, actually some of the demonstrations with his own dogs out in the field was actually quite harsh, and one I actually walked away from because I couldn't keep on looking. I just thought, oh God, no, there's absolutely no need for that. And there isn't any need for that, because basically that just smacked of somebody who was frustrated in his role. The dog hadn't done what he had expected to do, but he probably set the dog up to make a mistake, actually. And so it wasn't the dog's error, really. It was human error. And I think a lot of things that I've seen, and I've since been part of training groups over the years where I've watched people, sometimes it's been from the trainers and sometimes it's actually been from the people who I've been training with, who come along, to learn, and they may have had wrong messages passed on to them, and I'm seeing, and I remember I took a picture of a line of us in some beat. We were doing a walked up exercise, and it was just a lovely moment because the dogs all looked lovely, and I'm kind of quite known for taking little photographic natural moments when they're happening. But it wasn't until later that day, my friend who was working with me that day, she said, oh my God, did you see that picture of, and I went and I looked back and zoomed in, and he was just, he was stood and his dog was there, but the dog's face was like arching back from the palm of his hand, and the palm of his hand was actually just resting by his side. But you could clearly see that the palm of his hand facing could mean anything. So the dog was going to stay wide clear of that. But he is notorious for tugging ears, smacking on the side of the head, just in frustration or in his way, I'm just correcting my dog. But he was actually asked by the people who were running the day that if he continued to do that, then he would have to go. So I applaud them, for that.
I think this is the sort of thing that came out over the weekend. So as we published more of the messages, obviously keeping them all as anonymous as we possibly could, I had lots of messages where it was asked not to put them up, so I respected that, where they were like thanking us for even having the conversation. And I thought, why are they thanking us? And I thought, this is because this is the conversation that's not had. I've not really thought about it. It's had one-to-one. Like you and me could meet up somewhere and say, did you see this or did you see that or blah, blah, blah. It's had like that, but it's not being acknowledged across the sector. We know it happens. You've only got to be involved in gun dog training for a small amount of time to know it happens. And I would like to say that if, for example, if you look at the police force, they are very good police, and then you have the one or two that sour the name.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case here, but I don't think it's one or two. I think that majority is higher simply because trainers have taught people who've then gone on to be trainers, and they don't know any different anyway. And they are all, I never wanted to mar the name of traditional training, because traditional training got us to where we are now. But there are certain things.
Progression, Joe. It's progression.
Yeah, we shouldn't be bringing them forward with us. I don't personally see any need to be ragging a dog around by its ear at any point in its life. There is just no need. Always growing up, my dad would say to us, you can pick the dog up by the scruff to put it over a fence or whatever. His mum used to pick him up by the scruff. use it to handle the dog. Put the dog in the back of the van, pick him up by the back of the scruff. Fine. Nowhere have I been said, pick him up by the scruff or by his neck and shake him violently until he gets the message. Because I don't understand what message any dog could ever get from that other than the person that loves me is now hurting me. Now, in my eyes, I'm not saying dogs are human, because they're not. They're certainly not capable of the levels of emotion we are. But they do know pain, and they do know hurt, and they do know sadness. And they know when we are angry or upset with them. So why are we bringing this type of training forward?
Yeah, we shouldn't be, because just like with anything else, and I know, yes, dogs aren't human. No, they don't feel emotions on the same level that we do. And they certainly don't think about the things the way that we do. But they are, as you say, very capable of feeling when something is not right. And actually, that's when people lose it, it's just a reflection of them losing it, and not the dog itself. You can be corrective, you can be firm, you can be crystal clear to a dog about what is right and what is wrong, and you can do that in a very, if you've got a dog which is hot, more challenging, things like that, then it does require you, to be, firmer, keep them in a good lane. But violence has never been the answer to anything, ever, in any situation. It teaches nothing. All it teaches is that you've lost it. And the minute you lose it, then power and respect, I think, starts to diminish. And then what happens is dogs start to learn how to fear, and I've seen plenty of fear-based dogs around me, just in the general sort of shooting field. There are some people that don't even advocate going to, sorts of trainings and things like that. It's all self-taught, and that's fine. But I think then they're not perhaps, getting on board with some of the more positive ways that you can actually accomplish the same objective. Every dog is different, but the answer is never, ever heavy-handedness. It's never violence. It's never hitting. It's not for humans. It's not for dogs. It's not for anything, because that just shows that you've lost it. You've literally lost control when that moment happens. And that doesn't earn the respect of anyone.
I think the other thing that's sort of frustrating for a novice person is, if you've got a pup, we talked about this in one of the other podcasts. If I was coming into the horse riding world, somebody would give me a horse that was 12-year-old, knew the job inside out, and I would purchase that horse and I would learn to ride on a horse that would basically correct me. It would put me right all the way through. It would school me. In the dog world, that doesn't tend to happen, because if you've had a dog that long and it's been a good dog to you, you keep hold of it all their life. So I think the dog world and the Gundog world must be one of the only places where you have a new owner and a new puppy put together and said, crack on, have a little go with that. And the new owner doesn't know what's going on, and the new puppy doesn't know there are rules. And it probably causes some of the worst frustration and brings the worst out of people. But when you are sitting in the house with that 12-week-old pup, and you think, I don't know how to do this, I will seek out the guidance of a trainer. So you're starting out with the best will and intention in the world. And you type into the computer Gundog trainer, because you want a Gundog trainer for your Gundog. Oh my God, they are met with so many acronyms, types, methods, ways. They're blown away before they even know. You're a long way into your journey. I'm 5 or 6 years into this journey. I still don't know what half these acronyms mean. I'm like, I don't really know what it is that I'm actually looking for. Did you find that coming in that you were a little bit like, well, what is it? What is all this?
Massively. And I basically sort of set about reaching out to lots of people. I think I recognised very early on that it was a world which was very opinionated, whether it be about breeds, types, colours, all those types of stuff. I'd never walked into such an arena where there was such massive opinion, and as we've spoke about before, when I got my first chocolate Labrador, oh my God, you'd have thought I'd have bought a Terry's chocolate orange. I plonked it in the middle of the cheese board. What are you doing? Type of thing. I just, but I my God, the opinion and like even on, shooting, and how people were running shoots and, etiquette, this, that, and the other. And it was so different. And then, you had all these different protocols, and some which were, and some shoots operate it, others don't. And it was just a whole mass of confusion, contradiction. I'm just thinking, oh my God. And every time you put yourself in the hands of a trainer or somebody who's knowledgeable, you think you're getting the right information. And to a degree you are. But I think what I've learned is that nowadays we're seeing more behaviorists and canine people rocking up in the training environment, which is lapping over into Gundog world. But it feels like the majority of Gundog trainers, which have become very well known, they're affiliated with competitions and trials and things that they may have won. So there's, that they're heavily endorsed because, so it comes with all of this, gold attached to it because their dogs have reached field trial status and, they've had lots of years of experience. But you're talking about, I think, a lot of those big trainers, and fair play to them, each to their own, but they are living a very different life with their dogs. And for them, it's a business, because and so they have to achieve, they have to keep growing, they have to keep competing, they have to keep showing up. And that requires them to manage and, exist with their dogs in a different way. I think the majority of our women here in this group are the people who, they love their dogs. They've decided perhaps to go into the Gundog stuff because they actually got a Gundog that, oh, actually, no, I'd quite like to do that. We're seeing a lot more of an explosion of, pet Gundog owners, which are, again, they're kind of poo-pooed by some of the more professional people. But actually, if you looked at it probably statistically, there's probably more pet dog gun dog owners. But not only that, I always leverage it as well. I've got working gun dogs. The working season for us starts end of September, finishes at the end of January. We're talking 5 months of the year, so it's not even the whole year. During that time, how many times are we actually going out? Joe average, how often will they go out? So how often is my dog going out? So when you leverage that down, actually the majority of the time, the dog is your companion at home. They're a member of the family. We spend a lot of time, training for stuff, going to things and stuff, but we also spend a lot of time just being a family, doing what we need to do on a daily basis. So all of those things, kind of become relevant. And so, yeah, I think for me, what I've had to learn to do over time is to cherry pick everything that each different trainer bought me. But I would sort of realise that there was parts where actually, no, I don't quite agree with that particular way, and I don't feel that that's necessary. So I won't do that. But I've never stopped putting myself into a learning environment, because over the 8 years of me doing this, I've noticed how much the landscape has changed. And as I said earlier, we've got a lot more behavioural stuff which is coming in. The lockdown, the whole, nearly 2 years that we've all been living through has created some global conversations about dog ownership, etiquette, just from, forget about the gun dog stuff, but just about understanding actually what your dog requires. And I find all of that really fascinating. And I think all of those things collectively have a place. So when you go to a gun dog trainer, it's not just about focusing on whether they can, retrieve to hand and, run out 100 yards and you can stop and hunt and you can cast them left and right and blah, blah, blah. In that training setting where a dog, it's a bit like if you take your kid to an adventure playground and you absorb all of your time and energy on them at that time. They're massively responsive, your kids, which they've got all of your attention. Your dogs are exactly the same. You want that same level of respect when you're away from that and the focus isn't always on them, and can they still be balanced and exactly the same? So for me, it's about cherry picking what has been useful information, but that actually takes time. A lot of our women who are starting out doing this for the first time, they are novice, they don't know what they don't know. They are like sponges, they're hungry for it, they want to absorb, and if they are absorbing the wrong information, oh gosh, then that relayed over onto a dog just literally makes my blood run cold, because now I know what I know. I realised how dangerous the wrong information at the wrong time in someone's journey can be for them and the dog.
I think the frustrating thing that we see in a lot of our ladies is almost a sadness that A, they're not going quick enough, or B, the dog is not behaving perfectly. And if I look at that, if you look at the Gundog world and what we want of our, let's call them pet Gundogs, it's not very different to what we want of any dog. The UK, I think they said on the last census, over COVID, we went from 9 million homes having dogs to 12 million. So 3 million people or 3 million homes that have suddenly now got a puppy and they have no idea what to do with. And that's being reflected in rescues and everywhere else. But it's because I think across all of it, we've lost the sight of what these owners need right now, regardless of the breed, working breed, mixed breed, whatever. They need the dog to come back when they call it. They need the dog to sit still in the house while they're doing something, or sit still when they're in the coffee shop. And they need the dog to be calm around people. It's pretty much all that's what they want. Maybe they want them to walk perfectly to heel. Maybe they want to throw a tennis ball on the beach and the dog always brings it back and not runs off. But it's all we're asking for at the beginning with a pup is basic, sensible, common sense obedience, so that the dog's got a bond with you and would rather be with you than bogging off with the person who's walking down the beach and is 500 yards away. Where are our trainers that's not being trained in a positive manner to build those bonds? And I know there are loads of amazing trainers, and I don't want to reflect on them at all, because they're doing a fantastic job and they are doing this brilliantly. But where are the rest of the trainers to say, what does this owner and this pup need, which is the pup needs to come back. The pup doesn't need to be scared of the owner because the last time they came back, they had a clout on the head. They need to have a bond. Where is that training?
Yeah, and it's not there. And I have to say that it's only so last year where I train, it's been introduced in as much as simple things like how a young dog learns to meet and greet another dog. And I've got to be honest with you, Jo, I never even knew that was a thing until we made it a thing, and it became a thing in our group. You know, when we would just rock up, all the dogs actually got used to just being sat separately from each other. Everyone just got their dogs out of their vehicles. We all just stood in our allocated spot. We did whatever the training required with these young dogs, but none of them interacted at all. And then later on, they then decided actually it was a very important thing to teach, because then you start to see, actually, what kind of a dog do I have? You know, we've got all of these labels now that we all have to seemingly understand, and it gets a bit confusing. But actually, it just boils down to what kind of a character have I got? You know, simplify the whole thing. And the simple measure of being able to take your young pup, you know, and I'm talking all of them were under 6 months, take your young pup to a group. You know, the training people, they had older, what they call stooge dogs, which were able to just sit, and they, you know, they're not going to be paying attention to the pup, and they would just sit. And it was our job to one by one walk towards this dog in the same calm heel position, and then see what your pup would do. So, you know, the ones which were lunging forward with excitement, we then were to just turn around and retrace our steps, saying nothing, because actually the message was, you don't get to meet somebody whilst you're in that state. So no harshness was required. It's just, no, that's not happening. And that's how it all begins, you know. But I don't know anybody who's training that. I don't know, you know, and a lot of gun dog trainers are not actually that interested in seeing dogs really until they're 12 months old, because they feel like they should just be. But in that time, that's parts of me that agrees with the fact that actually, let pups be pups, because they've got so much change, growth, you know, boys, girls, hormones, testosterone, all this explosion of stuff, you know, sensory things. We're establishing, you know, what makes them fearful, what they get aroused by. There's a lot that happens in that, you know, and just even as they're growing, you know, it requires an awful lot. And I think you can use that time to create some manners and some basic, because all of those basic manners and boundaries within your home, I think, is enough so that when you then go on to then train them, they've got that lovely basic respect and bonding with you. Because if you don't have a bond with a dog, and if you're not like the best thing in the whole wide world, they're not really going to go on to do anything that spectacularly with you. So use the time to do that, but you can, also add value as you go, but on a case-by-case basis. But we do not have trainers that are doing that.
And this is my frustration again. So I get messages outside of this weekend, which was heartbreaking, but things like, I've been told to lock my dog in a crate and do nothing with it till it's 12 months old. And I'm like, please don't do that. Now, either the message has been lost, what the trainer meant has been lost, but also it's a very dangerous thing, like you just said, to have a novice owner keeping a dog in a crate for 12 months, taking it out for pee and putting it back in. It's neglect. They don't mean to neglect their dog. I'm sure the trainer didn't mean for them to neglect their dog, but I don't care how you wrap it up, it's neglect. That dog needs interaction. It's a being that requires interaction. Dogs don't live on their own. That's not the nature of this species. And I think where you just said about just general obedience, that type of steadiness, that calmness, that bond with the owner, that's the foundations of our gun dog training world. Everything else in gun dog training would be 90 times easier if the dog was calm to begin with.
Yeah, so for me, because as you know, I breed. So my breeding journey has taught me the setup that I have when they're, coming out of the whelping box is frustration is one of the biggest corruptors of puppies. So my environment for them means that that frustration never happens, because they have room and space to move, which is still controlled. It still has boundaries, but that frustration doesn't happen. We've set up our boot room, which has 2 parts, which then links to an enclosed outside area with a covered roof. So it doesn't matter what time of year it is. When they all reach that point of them coming out of the whelping box and we're on the move, I have a big crate or 2 which have no doors on them. I take all the doors off my crates, which will freak most people out, because the crate is in a zone. It's their zone. And I advocate highly that dogs should have a zone. But what that means is they choose to then go in the crate for sleeping purposes. They know that sleeping happens in there and toileting doesn't. So when they come out of there, anything from there is toileting. But then they also learn that they, when it comes to number 2s, wees are a completely different thing. But the majority of dogs like to poop well away from where they sleep and play. And if they can go outside, all the better. And mine can go outside, safely and effectively. It also teaches them to watch the ones which sit on the threshold, kind of going, oh, that smells interesting, but I'm not quite sure. But what it does is it allows each individual puppy to be itself. That's my point. And that I pass on to my puppy owners, who then go and take them home. And I've as yet never had any issue when the pups go back to other people's houses. And bearing in mind, there's a big change of environment. Some have got dogs, some of them don't. So some of them are going from lots of dogs, because mine obviously see my other dogs, which are, walking around outside on the other side of the pen, and others go back to a completely silent home. But the majority of them have never had any issue, and they take them home because there's been no frustration. So I think when we're now talking about our novice ladies and, where they sit with things and what is the right thing to do, and is this cruel, is it not cruel? Crates do have their place, but I believe that crates need to sit within a penned area so that the dog has some freedom. It still has its boundaries. You're teaching it that this is where you need to be and this is where I need for you to be because it's safe. But yeah, I'm not an advocate of heavily crating, because I think actually if they learn to settle in an area, then it's the beginning foundations of, helping that dog to be themselves. Otherwise you just, frustration is, oh my God, it's a nightmare.
And that is the thing, the frustration. Now, to bring it into example, Grace is in the house. Grace is 11, she's coming on to 12. If my dad was still alive, he would up her on the bench. There's a dog bench that we've got. And if she stepped off there, he'd be cross. He wouldn't rag around by her ears, but she would know he'd be cross, because my dad was very much a traditional trainer. When I tell you to do something, you do something. There is no conversation about it. I am not that strict with them to reinforce it. And B, I don't want it to be that they can't move off, off a designated bench. So now I have looked with time, because I've learned this over time, and it is years and years that gives you this in dog training. I now have settle, which now means
I like
lay down. I don't care where you lay down, but just blink and lay down. When I get up to go to the toilet, you don't need to come with me. When I go to the fridge, I would rather you didn't come with me. It's that type of conversation. Settle means please settle down. If we're having food, we've changed the porch. Bless my family, there are no shoes in the porch anymore. Now they've got a cupboard for themselves, and the dogs have got the porch. And I'm like, right, we're having food. I'm going to put you in the porch, because you guys are not going to ignore the fact that you can smell all our lovely food. You're going to be mooching around underneath. It doesn't matter how many times I'm going to tell you to settle. So to take away the frustration, which is what we've just discussed, I just put them in the porch.
Crystal clear.
Yes, so they don't have to control their behaviour.
Nope. I'm
controlling the behaviour by making the boundaries not woolly. They're still very clear boundaries, but they're not so tight that they can't. They've got loads of air up spots.
So there's a time and place for everything. I think particularly, I coexist with my dogs. We have a kennel outside, which is basically their bedroom. Or somewhere that if there's a lot going on in the house, then they just go into the kennel yard. It's a big kennel, and it's an open yard. They're not like in runs and runs. They can all just whatever. It's just open pods, and they can sleep and play whatever. And I think it's really useful that dogs get used to being in different zones, so that at any given time, as you just demonstrated, when you've got mealtime going on and we've got family over, I don't want dogs everywhere. But they're really content to just be, in the boot room, and then, then the back door will be open. If any needs to go to the toilet, they can go to the toilet. Some people, I think when dogs are younger, being able to control when they go to the toilet, which is why if you have a penned area in a zone, but that's all about timings of everything. But I think, by and large, it's the stuff that you do every single day, because quite frankly, the Gundog training, if that's not going to be properly taking place until a dog is, a minimum of 6 months, which is, I think, when a lot of people generally sort of think about doing it, and some which are kind of older, and that's taking place once a week, and you're doing your bits of homework. But actually, every single day, the things that you do daily are the things which enable the dog to build pattern, routine, trust, manners. So for me, bringing 11 dogs into the house, and into their boot room, it's thresholds all the way. We come out of one zone, one by one, to their name. We do it again coming into the boot room. And then if I'm bringing them into the house, it happens again. Then sometimes I might just bring out, 4 or 5 of them for a cuddle, and the rest of them stay. So they learn that it's not always them. Sometimes it's someone else, because these are the things that are replicated later on. So when I'm picking up, I might just be sending Duke, and it might be none of them. It's whatever I decide, whatever bird is down, whatever the shoot scenario allows for. So they get used to their pack. They're not always the one, being picked for everything. So the daily repetition is the thing which I think builds and grows. So then when you then have a purpose and you put them into a training setting, and then you're starting to learn something else and bring different things out in the dog, they trust you, they respect you, because you've demonstrated daily.
And this is, I think, for want of a better word, this is like the big, massive centre missing piece of a jigsaw, is because these types of skills are not being taught to people where they can teach these calmly at home before we even get to the Gundog training. So then when they turn up for the Gundog training in 6 months, 6 months to 2 years, I pretty much would say, or even more if you haven't put the work into the dog. For me, Buddy and Ella, they're coming up to 3, still cast them as babies a little bit, because I know what amount of work they've had with Dad passing. Why are you trying to enforce such, not routine, but why in a training situation would a trainer ask a young dog to behave so perfectly when he doesn't even know what the game was to begin with? So how do I teach a dog, like you said, to deliver, sitting perfectly in front of me, put your head up, give me whatever I've thrown? That's not even a natural position. We should be really blessed that the Lincoln thing brought it back to begin with. right? The fact that it's made the effort as a pup, as a youngster, untrained, to be all excited, to go out to get something for you and bring it back. Does it matter that it doesn't sit down straight away? Should we not be encouraging the natural behaviours we want to see? You know, I do believe in correction, and we'll come back to that in a little minute. But really, we're not even given enough time to train where the problem is not correction. The problem is the dog doesn't understand.
No, and I think this is the biggest misconception. It doesn't matter how old your dog is. If you put yourself into a training environment, you're basically saying, okay, what does my dog know? So in order to understand that, you do a sequence of things. But then also, I think everything's very context specific. I've learned that, you know, my dogs have been great in certain things, retrieving and doing stuff. Switch up the context or add in a few different things. All of a sudden, actually, it becomes apparent they haven't fully understood that command. So I think, you know, we're not talking about correction, but I think in terms of being able to progress and move forward, you actually have to understand, well, actually, what has my dog done? And I don't think enough people proof things. I think if you train in the same area, if you train on the same land, you know, because environment is very indicative of what a dog takes in. And then if you ask it to do it in a completely different terrain, you might find actually they've not fully understood. I would have been about 4 or so years into my training experiences and kind of growing my knowledge, and found myself on a training day with a group of people, you know, I know them well. And I was in a situation whereby I was being asked to do something quite abruptly with my dog. It wasn't sitting well with me. I tried to express that actually, no, he was struggling he clearly had not understood the back command, but because he was now sort of 3, nearly 4, there was an expectation from my trainer that actually he should know this. We've done this a million times. But as I've said before, everything is context specific. And I think there was just something about this particular exercise where I cast him out. He'd probably gone at a good 70 yards, gone through a gateway. I stopped him. He stopped beautifully. And I then needed to push him back. Whether the nature of the land and having gone through a gateway and, you know, he'd done all of that, because for some dogs it can be a problem. He just sat frozen. And I just went, and I was instructed to be quite forceful and, you know, really go back, you know, be really, really firm. And then I was asked to go closer to him because he was just sat there. Now, I know my dog well enough to know that actually when he doesn't understand something, he will sit there. He wasn't being, you know, as I was hearing in my other ear, no, he's just being an absolute dick. He's just, you know, this, that, and the other. And I'm thinking, no, he's not. He doesn't understand what I'm asking him to do. We'd done, you know, it was near the end of our session. Everyone was quite tired. I felt under pressure to get the job finished because everyone needed to go home. You know, the sun was setting and it had been a long time. And I allowed that pressure to get to me. And I walked up in front of my dog and I went, go back. And he went, that's not working, as he said. So run in towards him and really tell him off. And I found myself doing it. And I did it. And then, and it started, and, you know, poor Duke, he sort of went back a little bit. And then I went, no, it's not going to work. And I slipped on the lead and I walked back with him. And from that moment, I vowed never to allow somebody and the pressure of the fact that it would already, you know, we were near the end of the session, it was nearly time to go home. And I would advocate the same for everybody. As soon as something feels not right, and you know enough yourself to know your dog, actually, he sat there with utter confusion, and it was irrelevant how old he was. It was irrelevant how many other spectacular things he can do and accomplish. He did not understand what I was asking him. And that was a me problem, not a him problem. And I think those distinctions become quite clear. And that's, you know, from somebody from me who was, you know, a good 4 years into my education of dogs. And yet that can still happen, you know, so pressure in environments from other people and scenarios can get us all a bit hot under the collar, but it certainly was a lesson that I took on board. And I will always have the confidence to stand up for my dog and say, no, my dog can't do that. And if I see them struggling, have the power and the confidence to say, I'm going to slip a lead on and we're just going to take a step back.
And that the fact that you can remember and bring back, we're videoing this as we record the podcast, so I can see the emotion on your face. Still hurts you now that you did that, because you knew that the dog wasn't ready for it. And it's about finding the trainers who, when you say, the trainer might want, it's their job to encourage you to move the dog forward. But when you say, I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't understand that they don't get frustrated with you either. Instead, they say, okay, let's look at that. Why are you worried about that? What do you think? Because again, you do know that dog better than they do. They get to see it for 1 hour a week of its life, if that.
Yeah. I mean, this was the dog that, bless him, we got that lovely, one in the Gundog journal, but this was Duke, who had overcome gun nervousness and lack of confidence to pick up birds. We are a team. And now, I mean, he turns 5 in January, and he is my absolute go-to, and I very nearly could have undermined what we had done and accomplished and shared. So I absolutely knew that he wasn't a dog as I was being, in my ear. He wasn't taking the piss out of me. This was a dog that, for whatever reason, he did not understand what I was asking him to do. The back command for him, just wasn't there.
And I do think the one emotion dogs do share with us is trust. And once that trust is broken, I don't know, I may be wrong because I'm very, very young at all this, but I think if you break a trust with the dog, it's very, very hard for that dog to ever fully believe in you like it did before. Just as it in between humans, it's very hard when you've broken trust to ever regain the same level of faith you had in each other. I think once you've broken that trust, that dog will always be wary of your intentions.
Doubt. They will doubt you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, for that moment, what are you doing? What are you asking of me? And now you're getting really cross and angry, and now you're getting closer to me, and oh my God, now you're in my face. And I'm just like, and even as I stood there, but the pressure of where I felt that I felt pressure from all around. And yeah, and there probably was a bit of confusion to me. We've done back command a million times. What's happening here? But you then have to kind of go, what? It's irrelevant. He's not taking, he just doesn't understand. And now I've made it worse, because now he's looking at me as if to say, you've never shouted at me because I've never needed to.
Yeah.
So what's happening? And I felt absolutely awful.
You mentioned earlier proofing, and I know like in the Hot Mess Handler course, they teach us very much, the trainers, the distance, duration, distraction. And they will say every single time, if something's not going right, change one of them. Is it the distance? Is it the duration? Is it the distraction? What is it? Now, for you, looking back over time, you could probably say, well, it might be been the distance, and it might have been the distraction of going through the posts. You know what those things are, and how you mentioned them align somewhere to those three. And every one of our trainers say, reduce the time, reduce the distance. You looked at the distraction. In time, had you not felt the pressure of all that, you might have said, okay, well, I'm going to reset inside the gate, send him back, and then go the other side of the gate and send him back. So we work out what it is. But it is that pressure of people making you think that dog has got to get it straight away, when the reality is there is no time limits on this, is there?
No, there isn't. And I think, we're all human and we're all capable of feeling pressure, and none of us knows how we're going to react at any given time. And I basically allowed my training environment and my setting and the pressure of being the last one to go, and that everybody else's dog they hadn't done it perfectly, but they'd managed to find a way to get the job done and get the retrieve, and I didn't. And I think, it's important to remember that, these things will happen, and we are all only human, but I massively allowed all of those things to affect me, and I allowed the white noise of my trainer to push me into being something that I'm naturally not. Don't do it, people. Just don't do it. I think, unfortunately, this is where pressure comes in, because people develop an expectation. Well, we've been doing this for months and weeks, and they've been doing it perfectly fine. Now they're not. Well, okay, well, why is that? It could actually be that there's something wrong with your dog. It could be something medical. Is it you? You having a shit day and you're actually channeling it through, and your dog is picking up on all of that, and you're not really in the game, or is it that you've changed the environment, something different has changed, and it's causing your dog to have a bit of confusion? And I think it's only the people who, you know, truly know and understand their dogs, and themselves, actually, because sometimes the accountability is us, and we are fully aware that we head off because, you know, this is training day and it's all booked in, but actually I've had a really shit day and I've had an argument with my husband and the kids are really pissing me off, and, you know, now I'm running late and oh shit, I forgot my whistle and now I've got to borrow somebody's, and oh bloody hell, it's raining and I haven't got a hat, you know, and you arrive and you're a right bag of shite, and all of a sudden your dog's going, what's going on? And then you're asking it to do something. You don't realise that your tone has changed. One of the most powerful things I do for myself when I can is I've got myself a tripod and I'll video myself, because often, and I learned this from shooting, so when you have somebody who's teaching you to shoot, you've got a coach over your shoulder, in your head you're doing one thing, but actually in reality something different is happening. And I think if you watch yourself back, you'll suddenly go, oh God, do I do that? And then you notice actually your tone of voice has changed. You know, and it's a bit kind of like, you know, when people get desperate when they're trying to recall a dog back, all of a sudden their voice gets quite angry. You know, so now that's basically, that's one of the first subtle levels of losing control. When actually that person who's losing control and shouting and then starts swearing is the person who's embarrassed, and that's ego talking. You know, because someone's, will you fucking get back in? It's like, no. And the dog's like, absolutely, is that dog going to come anywhere near you? I remember my first trainer, that point very much stayed with me, because when a dog was doing something incorrectly, he sort of tapped somebody on the shoulder who was, you know, losing the plot with their dog. We were in a training setting, so it couldn't go anywhere, but it was just literally showboating all over the place. And he just put his hand on their shoulder and went, look, just if you want to swear, that's fine, but say it with a really lovely voice. Come here, you little fucking shit, come on. Because they have no concept of the words that you're using, but they have every concept of your tone of voice. But actually, by putting yourself in that tone of voice, it brings you back down to a place where you can have some control, because, you know, that is the first level of losing it.
I'm hoping that this podcast will be, I'm going to put it when somebody joins the group, that they go and listen to this first, because in order to know what type of trainer you need to go to, you need to understand the training journey you're about to go on. And the first thing I think, from discussing this with you and from discussing with other members, you're looking for a trainer that's got patience, but will also teach you what you need to do. We don't want to go to trainers where they are in any way cruel to our animals, because there's no need for it. There are corrections you can do, like you just said, tone of voice. A tone of voice can be used with an older dog as a correction by just, you know, like I or whatever the dog needs, individual to the dog. And that's something that as a novice you'll need to learn. What level does my dog need of my involvement or my correction? So, you know, for my two, just literally going, oi, that is it. But then you can't go to the other extreme and go to trainers where they say there are no rules, because when you then get to a position where you are walking on that dog on a beach and it's running after somebody's aggressive dog and it won't come back to you, or when you take it out onto the street and it runs in front of a car, you need to be able to look after your dog.
You do, and I think, you know, that always starts, you know, with the young dog. And again, you know, I have biting is obviously one of those big things that puppies do, and people always seem to be quite confused by how to correct that, because there's a lot of people that will tell you, well, that's what puppies do. Yeah, that is what puppies do. However, you know, if you've got a small child, you wouldn't allow them to keep repeating behaviours, you know, kicking you in the shins relentlessly. You'd do something about it. There'd be a consequence. And it's at these early stages that, you know, it's okay to be, with a puppy, you know, a little tap on its nose when it's kind of biting you. Little things like, you know, people who, when you put your hands, you know, to a puppy, they're often quite interested. But actually, if you keep jerking it away, they see that as a game. And then you then go into sort of like, you know, smooth them, and then that becomes a game. So actually, if you keep your hand still, And then, and when the puppy starts to bite it, you go, ah, ah, ah. No, it starts to realise that actually, no, it doesn't happen. But don't move your hand away. Wait for them to stop doing that, and then give them something else, to play. I think, for people across the board, there is so much information that they need to filter. And I think the pressure becomes enormous when they sort of start thinking about the responsibility of the Gundog stuff. I would say don't overwhelm yourself with that to begin with, because actually you have to grow with the puppy, and just those daily experiences and learning how to manage them as you go through. And it happens very quickly, because listen, puppies, they progress on very, very quickly. But if you don't get that right, then you're just going to have an absolute nightmare when you turn up, in your training group, and then you're going to feel like the one who's got the ASBO dog, and you think, oh my God, everyone else seems to be. But basically other people which are there and they seem to be in control have just perhaps got more experience. They've been there before. There's things that they do, so they're more familiar. But I'm always very open and I always try to be very helpful and accommodating, sort of to people which are in that position, because I know how difficult it can be, and I know how overwhelmed I felt. And it is overwhelming, because you feel this enormous responsibility for a dog, but it's as much about you growing as well. You as your dog is only as good as you can teach and educate it. And if you are confused at any point about anything at all, if you don't find a way to settle that, through groups like ours, through trainers, through belief and trust and working through it, then there's no point progressing on to anything else. And I think still there are a lot of people who go about their training and they're not quite sure what job or purpose they're going to have. That then creates confusion in your training styles, your methods, what you're going to do. And it also creates pressure. And there's people that want to compete, and that's absolutely fine, if you're a competitive type. But remember, with competition comes pressure, and with that comes an expectation, whether you think it openly or not. So be prepared for all of those things, because actually, is it about your expectation, or your dog living to its full potential? And it could well be that you're asking your dog to do something that is not within its capabilities, and you have to learn to be okay with that if you want to go on to compete. For me, I'm just happy to see my dogs happy and content in daily life, and when I'm able to work them, they work, and watching them come alive and see their breed in action, it's just joyful. But it is a massively complex environment, but in no way, shape or form should violence ever be the response to getting you to anywhere.
Like me and you've got a really fascinating situation right now when we come to this conversation. We are both coaches of people, of humans. So we understand training, and we understand teaching and mentoring and coaching at a very high level, but with people, not dogs. So we can come to it with a different perception and maybe a more understanding of what the new person is feeling. Because it is very easy in our journeys as we go on year by year by year to forget how it felt to be that novice, that new person with the dog. So I always think, how does the new person feel? Think, Joe, how did you feel? What was you worried about? What was you scared about? What was you think? And it is just this literally feeling of, I want to do the best for this dog, but I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know how to do that. And in picking the wrong trainer, you will build habits within the human owner that then is set for life. It'll be really hard to change those ways unless you're open, like you said, to always learning. If you're not that type of person and you're going to go to the training sessions and that way is going to be your way, it's going to be very hard for you to change that, isn't it?
It can be. I think, again, it's about leveraging your expectation. And I think there's no time limit on how long it takes to get a dog trained, because every single dog is different. Some dogs learn really quickly, pick things up, and they just have natural ability in spades. But then they might have other things where they're literally rubbish in certain home settings or certain social settings that makes them a problem on a daily basis. Or they might be, a menace to other dogs. Or do you know what I'm saying? That there are, no dog is perfect, and we certainly are not perfect. So I think, leverage that and take the time to understand your dog and its strengths and its weaknesses, and its flaws, and just accept them. None of us are perfect, and dogs certainly are not, but I would bargain that they are a lot more perfect than we are as humans, because they're less complicated in that way. And it's only us humans that kind of, underpin and undermine certain things, or by not allowing them. But, also take away the time thing, but also, really, really understand what it is you want from your dog, because, and be prepared for it to be, a mothership of ups and downs, but also recognize that it's never a done deal. A dog is never fully trained. I don't care what anyone says. And even when dogs reach, field trial champion status, basically that person has put like an order, like if you're training for a marathon, it's train for this competition. You've got to keep going with dogs. We have to keep going with ourselves. We're constantly correcting ourselves as humans. We're having good days and bad days. We've got lots of other different things that we need to fulfill. Dogs don't have as many criteria that we have to fulfill. So be realistic, with your expectations and in line with that, because it will reflect on, what you're doing. It's like, I've had a busy last 6 months, with health and grandchildren. It's been a busy old time. And so I've gone for damage limitation. So rather than undermining anything I've done with the dogs, if I haven't been able to train or do quite as much as I wanted to be able to do, I go for damage limitation. I don't create scenarios, environments where they can completely unravel and completely get it wrong. I just keep ticking things over. And when I can add content and quality, I do. But I take the pressure away from myself when I can't. And I think that's an important distinction, because I think every time people rock up in training scenarios, they think that everyone is doing more than they are, or they've got this, that, and the other, or, or they can train in better places than I can. That may well be the case, but actually dogs don't need, the Mendips to train on. They don't need an inordinate amount of land, to be able to do that. They just need you to be committed and to be consistent with what you're doing. You could just pick a quiet corner in your little bit of woodland and have, quality. And I think this is where, if I look back on my own experiences and where you can feel deflated, disheartened, what's happening, take a look at everything. But if you're finding it getting overwhelming, then just take a step back, take a breath, look at what's actually really happening, realign your expectations and go again with that, and
is that I say, you got comparasitis to the kids, right, to make a bit of a laugh out of it. Comparasitis in my eyes, we can have that going to an aerobics class, can't we? Or that person can bend more, that person looks thinner, that thing. That's like in our heads. The dogs, in my time with dogs, I've never seen a dog look at another dog and thought, they're looking way better at this than me. I don't believe they have that concept, nor do they particularly care. Even if they did, they just get on with their sort of day. So to finalize this now, because we could talk about this forever, and I think it is a fascinating subject. I don't think, and this again may be controversial, I don't think it's what label of trainer you go to. I think there are very, very good traditional trainers. There are very, very good positive trainers. There's very good, lots of different types of trainers. I think if you're new and you're going to look for a trainer, you're looking for a trainer who has kindness and has patience and can show you how to get your dog to where you want it to go in a positive manner that allows for the fact that you're both learning. Would that be fair?
It would be fair. And they have to be supportive of you. I have been to trainers where they might be very good at knowing things with dogs and having techniques and ways in which to accomplish something, but they're absolutely hopeless with people. And I'm afraid the two go hand in hand. You can't, it's a bit like going to a bad doctor, but we only call him a bad doctor because he's got horrible bedside manner, but actually he's probably, he's so qualified and has so much experience that he just focuses on that rather than his bedside manner. But unfortunately, but he only has to get the job done and prescribe and diagnose and all of that. He doesn't actually have to coach you on to anything else. It's helpful if you have one, which is a really nice doctor. But with training, it's not just about the skills and techniques for the dogs. It's about you as a handler. And I think I distinctly remember reaching a point in my dog journey that I went from being an owner to being a handler. But if I'm honest, it took me a good 4 years to feel like I could then actually use the word handler with some merit, because actually experience is what gets you to where you need to be. And I think that's something that everyone needs to leverage as well when they start out with dogs. You can have the passion for it, you can have a lovely dog for it, you can have the dedication for it, you can have the right trainer behind you, but actually it's all your experiences wrapped up together and all linked together that enables you to sort of step into your space and fully own it and understand, I'm a handler with a dog and then we're a team, because ultimately if you've got a working gun dog, you're a team, and you have to learn that when you go out on a job, you both are working together, and you've got to learn to recognize that actually there's times when I think my dog is not listening to me and it's gone off up a tree line, actually my dog knows something I don't. So I've learned to just take a step back and go, okay, now I'm going to stop with the recall because actually you've scented something, and sure enough, give it a few minutes and out will pop my dog with a bird. So you've got to grow that confidence and understand that actually that's the whole reason why we have dogs on a shoot, because they know things that we don't.
Yeah. Well, thank you very, very much for a fantastic podcast. I'm sure all the ladies are going to absolutely love it. Next week, join us for another podcast on this theme, where we will be talking to other different organisations on how they feel dog training can progress in the working dog world. Thank you very much, and we shall see you all next week.